Welcome back. We have a double video today, which is pretty rare for me. This is another video response. This is for Vintage Oddball Cards contest that's currently going on. He wants us to show us some of our rubber band, bike spoke, and shoebox cards contest. So essentially we're looking for ones that are real beaters. So I picked 15 cards to be able to do this video. I'm sure I have other ones I could highlight, but these are kind of 15 that stood out to me because they're all stars and Hall of Famers and ones you'd wish that kind of got in higher grade at some point. But all that have been well loved. You can kind of see the wear and tear of the cards in a way where you'd kind of expect it of a child that didn't really kind of care of the cards so much when they had them. They just kind of had them as a toy. I tried to take into account the era too when I'd be pulling cards, so I wouldn't really expect a card from the 1930s to be perfect. So I didn't really, if I was picking a card from that era, it had to be really bad, like above and beyond what you'd expect for a card of that era. And that kind of is true all the way through the 1970s. Pretty much when I got in the mid 70s and onward, most of my cards are in very good condition from that point forward. So we got some ones starting from 1975 going back. And so I got my 15 here. They're in no particular order. I actually have them in chronological order, and we'll do the two graded cards last as we go through this. So let's, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and show off the cards I picked out to highlight today. First one being George Brett's rookie. This isn't captured so well on the camera, but man, it's got a lot of whiting on it. It's snowed quite a bit. There's a massive crease here. There's a crease here on the back. The corners have been indented. It was a cheap card when I was able to buy it back in the early part of the 2000s, and it was the first time I was able to own this card that I really wanted. It was not a cheap card then either. This is what I could afford. I've never replaced it, and now probably to get one in really good condition would cost me quite a bit. So that's like the first card. It was like, man, that was kind of a beater, and I would love to have it in better condition. It probably would only grain out as maybe a 1 at the best on that one. This next card is from 1970, and it is the Willie McCovey card, another Hall of Famer, obviously. This one I picked because it's been faded so bad. It looks like it's actually like some sort of refractor image on there. There's like weird coloring on his uniform that should just be like that sort of off-white that they had in that era for their uniforms. The card itself has a lot of chipping on here. The corner is bent and indented. The back stained on here beyond just what would kind of be normal coloring of the card over the years. It's actually like dirt kind of stain on there. So this is the one I picked from the 1970 set. One I'll probably at some point will upgrade because it doesn't really cost a lot to pick up a better Willie McCovey on there in comparison to the George Brett. But I pulled that one out of my complete set. It's probably the worst looking of the Hall of Famers I have in that set. Hopefully it's kind of coming through on the camera, just how bad that kind of card is. But that was the second one here. The next one, I couldn't do a list without including the Mick. So we got the 1968 Topps Mickey Mantle. Actually doesn't look in very bad condition when you look at it. Yeah, you might notice the corners are kind of little rounded on here and there. The back isn't all that dirty except for maybe this corner where it had some wax stain. But if you've noticed it when I turn it around, look at the very top there. It's got a big old pinhole in it. Some kid probably had this card in their bedroom and pinned it to their wall or something like that. And later I was able to pick it up later in auction, obviously much later when I was working on my 1968 top set, and I couldn't afford a better looking Mickey Mantle at that time. It's one of my favorite Mantle cards. I just kind of like this image of him. And I like the hat kind of blends in kind of well with the matting on the card too. And the same with the arm sleeves that he has going on there. So it is probably my favorite Mick that I have in my collection of the, I think the 4 or 5 that I own. They're all in sets, so I don't have any that are graded, but this is probably my favorite one, despite having that big pinhole here, but it would be much better if it didn't have that pinhole for sure. Let me show you that good old pinhole last time. My Frank Robinson rookie actually's got a pinhole in it too. This one, another Yankee. Got a 1967 Topps Whitey Ford here. The front, you can't really pick it up so well, but there's a lot of snowing on the front of the card. But the reason I picked this one is not just because of the crease here. What the hell is this on the back of the card? Looks like it's chewing tobacco got spit on the back of the card all over it. So it's like really dirty and stained. So it's not even just like faded, like this avocado green should be a little bit darker, but it's kind of faded in time, but it's also got some crap all over the card. Yeah, so it's not one you catch if you look at the front of the card because it didn't bleed through. But when you got it, you're like, ooh, what happened to the back of this card? So there we got the chairman of the board, another Yankee, Whitey Ford. All right, the next one is a 1966 Topps card. During the pandemic, these league leader cards that had multiple Hall of Famers on them became really popular. And this one is also one that has 3 featured on it, including 2 guys that have hit over 500 home runs in their career. So the back of the card looks pretty good. On there, really no major complaints other than there is a noticeable crease here, but I wouldn't pick it just because of the crease. But check out that paper loss. Almost all of Billy Williams' face has been ripped off on this card. So it's a really not good looking card whatsoever, but I do still have it because it's, Mays, McCovey, Williams. At some point when I work on the 66 set, which will probably be maybe the next one I add after I complete the 4 sets I'm working on. But I'll get a better copy of this card, and I'm sure it's a lot more than they used to be. These used to be like really inexpensive cards to pick up when I was building sets, starting in the 60s and 70s, but now they've gone up a lot if they have like 3 Hall of Famers on there. And I always thought that was kind of cool when a card like this would have multiple Hall of Famers, and it looks like the community agrees now, finally. All right, now we're going to go to 64, and this Brooks Robinson, it looks like it was taken and just scratched along concrete on there because it's scratched up. It's got white, and it's got a lot of that snowing all over the front of the card. The corners itself and the edging is actually not bad, and the centering's not bad, but man, it's gone through a lot. You can see a little bit that they scratched this off so they could actually answer the question or whatever it may have been. So who owns the best season earn run average? Fred Scoopy, I think is what it says. I'm not even sure who that is. I actually thought that was Ed Walsh, but I guess he maybe had been topped. Oh, it's .09 in 1916. I don't know if that was a full season, but man, that's like less than a run in a game. That's kind of crazy. But there's the 1964 Topps Brooks Robinson, which I think I picked up for in a dollar bin, I think at the 2019 National. So it was hard to turn down. All right, I remember getting this one also for $1, but back in the late 90s. And I was like, oh, he had just gotten in the Hall of Fame right around this time. So it was a name that was familiar with me at that point. Is the 1959 Topps Bill Mazeroski. The reason I picked this card because I have tons of 1959 Topps cards, and none of them look as bad as this. It's rounded on every single corner you can find on here, and the edging is also kind of rounded and worn. The centering is actually really good on the card, but if you look closely at the edges, I don't know if you can kind of show up on the camera so well, it is all stained. Like it got dropped in like a cup of coffee or something like that. So the back's all dirty. Whatever it got dropped in, it's got all that residue on there. So I think it was $1 then, and I think it's still $1 now, which is kind of funny because this card probably has no chances of appreciating. So there's Bill Mazeroski, the World Series MVP of 1960. All right, moving into the 50s now, or continuing with the 50s, I should say. Here's Richie Ashburn. I got a few Richie Ashburns that I could have pulled, including a 53 Bowman that looks awful, but I picked this one. This one is another one that's got massive snowing. It looks like it's been scraped up against a lot of rough surfaces over the years, and the corners are rounded on here. But I got another one. Man, if it was not in that condition, look at the centering on this card. Maybe it's a little off top to bottom, but like from right to left, it's pretty good. And the back doesn't really have any marks on there other than this like rounding of the corners, as I kind of previously mentioned, but the front is just beat to crap. There we got Richie Ashburn. Here's one I pulled from my 1957 Topps set. And it's one of those cards in the set that, man, you wish you had in better condition, but sometimes you have to afford the ones you can get. And it's a big rookie that's in the series that is short printed in this set. And it's Brooks Robinson. So this is the one I was able to pick up at the time. There's creasing in here is in the shape of a cross. So it's got creases every single way direction on this card. Other than that, the centering is not terrible, but it's also got a lot of like dirt residue on here. I don't know if this is just wax or if it's like dirt. So it might be wax from the wax pack itself, but there's dirt here on the top, dirt all over the front, dirt all over the back. So it's definitely a card that's seen better days, for sure. And it probably would only grade out, I imagine, maybe as authentic because of all the crap that's on it. Maybe a 1 at the very least. But there he is, my Brooks Robinson rookie card, which is part of my 1957 top set, which I've featured before on this channel. All right, so this one is actually going to be from the 55 top set. I know we've talked about the first cards of sets in the 50s and 40s and 30s and sometimes even the 60s being really coveted because they're always in kind of bad condition if you can find them, because people put them on the tops of their piles and they got worn, rubber band marks, all kinds of different things. Well, this one's no exception to that. This is William Harridge, the president of the American League at that time. The top sets for, I think, 56 and 55 included both the National League and the American League presidents. But this is the first card in the set. It's like off center because it got kind of miscut too to begin with, but it's got a nice little crease along here. The snowing's bad. It's got a crease here. More of the surface has been kind of rubbed off. The coloring's almost gone on it in some places. So it's in pretty bad shape. The back of the card actually stands out pretty well. So this one didn't take the beating on the back as much. So you can tell that however it was like held or kept over the years, the front was definitely taking the beating on there, took the brunt of the wear and tear over the years. So I'm not sure if he's in the Hall of Fame or not, but I did pick this card just as kind of an example of the first card of a set from the 1950s. Again, this one probably would grade out a 1 at the best, I'm sure, maybe just authentic. All right, moving on to 1953. I got 2, one from Topps, one from Bowman. Ones that have been on the channel recently, starting with the Hal Newhouser. This is his last card with the Tigers, multiple MVP back in the 40s. A really high valued car, actually, in better condition, because I think it might be in the higher series. It might be a part of a short print, but I'm not entirely sure of that. This one did not cost me a high number on there, because you could see this one, the coloring's completely gone here. The scraping has been in here. There's multiple scratches on here too. Massive crease right through the middle of the card. We're missing coloring on the side because it's been worn off. There's a crease there. It's even off center if you want to add on there too. Actually, the snowing's not terrible other than like the really noticeable like wear and tear that it's experienced. The back of the card actually isn't too bad, but the creases do really take away from its luster and it's sort of its eye appeal on the back. But again, I didn't pay a lot for this card at a card show, and it's like, I don't have a Hal Newhouser at this point. Actually, I think I pick up this in his 55 at the same show from the same dealer. I thought it was kind of a cool looking card from a cool looking set. At some point, would love to have it in better condition, but that's what I got right now. This is the 1953 Topps beat to crap Hal Newhouser. I'm sure this one would probably be graded as authentic at the best. And as I mentioned, I also included a Bowman card from 53. This one's been on here recently, the George Kell card that almost has ideal centering for that era. And actually, there's not a lot of surface wear, except for when you see these 2 little pinholes that are in here. So I don't know if somebody had this stapled to a wall or something like that. But it is massively damaged, and you can see when they probably pulled it out to get it off from the wall, it really made a crease here, so it damaged that. So there's your George Kell there. You can see they even like show pretty prominently on the back when you look at it. You can see the damage from that process of removing those as well. Not a high valued Hall of Famer by any stretch of the imagination, but any card from 53, if it's in good condition, is gonna demand a little bit more money. Fortunately, I already had a copy of this card, so it's not the one that will be part of my eventual set when it's completed. It'll be part of my duplicates that I'll be moving on when I'm done kind of ordering lots. So there you got it, George Kell. It's on my list. Okay, we're down to just 3 now. So now actually going to get a card from the 1940s. And it's a 1940 play ball, Gene DeSchultels. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. If I butchered it, I apologize. crease here, crease here, crease here, crease here. So there's a crease in every corner, so I guess they're consistent. There's a little bit of like a pinhole right there, but mostly the image of him himself is okay on there. But these cards, they show the creases really well. If you ever have one of these, just because of the card stock, and you see this one has had a major chip here where it just kind of came apart. It looked like they kind of they made the front and the back kind of separately and had the cards kind of joined thereafter. That's kind of, looks like maybe I was kind of printed, but I could be wrong about that. So it looks like this whole part just kind of fell off at some point. Probably when it got creased really badly, that one just kind of got loose and it detached from the card. So I put that on there. He's not a Hall of Famer for sure, but I just wanted to pick a card from that set and kind of highlight it. And the last two, in my opinion, they break my heart. And here I'd love to have better looking ones, but this is what I could afford too. So I knew exactly what I was buying when I got it. So there was no disappointments with it. But man, they're cards that if they were in better condition would demand a whole lot more moolah. But for me, for the time being now, it's what I could afford, and they're perfect for me right now, but at some point I would like to upgrade them. Let's do the older one first, and then we'll go back to the one from the 1956 top set. So here is a Gaudi from 1933. It's Eddie Collins, which you could at least make out that part, but making out a lot of the image of the card is hard because it's super dirty. It's another one that looked like it got thrown into a bunch of spitting tobacco and just got stained all over it, in addition to the creases that happened on here. Looks like it may have even burnt at some point on this card. And this carries over to the back as well. A lot of paper loss kind of in the middle here. You can actually can't even read it without having to try to make up and assume what words were on this card to kind of make it all out. And the dirt just continues throughout on here. So you can kind of see just how dirty this card is. I actually had pretty good centering for a card from 1933, but it's really missing a lot of that. And you can see even on the corners, it's had some paper loss here because it doesn't really line up. You can see up here, it's kind of flush with the edge, but now you look here, it's kind of worn off. So maybe it was in a rubber band or something, was stored with other cards, and it's kind of worn off. As you can see, they couldn't even give it a 1 because it was so damaged. They just went with authentic. So you know what? I'll take that for Eddie Collins. Again, it was a card I could afford at the time. It'd be nice to upgrade it, but I think even an upgrade getting into 3 or 4 range is hundreds and hundreds of dollars on there. And this is his last card, I think from his playing kind of career, even though I think at this point he was a coach with the Red Sox, was moving in the executive offices. He may have appeared in a game or two. Got put into the Gaudi set, I think, just because of his name recognition. And he might be the only guy in this Gaudi set that also was in the 1909 T206 cards, which is kind of interesting. So covering that span right there was Eddie Collins. All right, final card, and this one won't disappoint. Jackie Robinson. This one actually did get assigned a grade from Beckett, but I'm surprised because there is no corners at all left on these cards. They've been completely rounded off. This edge right here has been completely rounded off too. Looks like someone took a bite out of the card. You can really kind of capture it now. You can see it's not flush with the bottom. It's like a little bit of a curve here, that's happening in the card. I mean, other than that, I guess the centering is kind of good if you were to capture something, but there's been so much paper loss on the sides of the cards, you can't tell. Other things that really detract from its luster is poor Jackie. These are scratches all over his face. This is definitely a card I think was probably maybe flipped on concrete and things like that back in the day. I could see it getting flipped and hey, a kid just wins all the cards and just grabs all of them, scratches them along the concrete. Well, I think that's what happened to my Jackie Robinson card here, is I got a lot of concrete scratch and wear on here. The back isn't much better. I mean, it's all legible, but there's some paper loss down here. The part of his stat line kind of got broke because of it. I think even the little part of the Topps company, oh, that's right there. I thought that part was maybe also worn off, but it didn't. You can read most of the parts on the back here, but you can definitely see the wear and tear from the corners and edges when you look at the front. No surprises that it's a 1. This is definitely one that needs to be upgraded in my collection at some point to at least a 2 or a 3. But hey, a Jackie's a Jackie, and his cards have just taken off so much that I'm just happy to be able to have in my collection. So sorry for the length of this response. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your weekend.